Right, been a hot minute on this YouTube channel since we uploaded something, but don't worry, we haven't gone far, we're still here. Lately, I have been a little bit obsessed with Dune Spice Wars. 54.6 hours currently in the game, and it's safe to say I'm a big fan of Fremen. Could quite possibly be my favourite faction within Dune Spice Wars, and what I've put together is a little cheat sheet here of everything that's kind of unique about the Fremen. Now, there are going to be some things in the game that are obviously a little bit more unique that this cheat sheet doesn't cover, but this is all the information that is available to you, and it's not kind of all consolidated in one place, so I thought we'd do this in a sheet together and run through it. So without further ado, let's just jump into it, and I'll give you some of my thoughts and feelings. This is an open discussion. You are entitled to have your own. We can agree and disagree on some things, but this is just my experience with the Fremen specifically, and let's run through first of all just a little bit of information about them, and also I just want to caveat that I am probably going to butcher some of the ways that you pronounce stuff in this game, so let's have a laugh on that, and feel free to correct me if I got them really wrong. So Fremen are the only people native to Arrakis and will do anything to protect their way against the Offworlders. While their leaders, Liet Khans, could have even pronounced one wrong already, we're not even a couple of minutes into the video, doesn't originally come from Dune, she is every bit as determined and attached to the planet as the next Fremen. So that's a bit of information about the Fremen. Some of their faction bonuses then. So spice fields in neutral and controlled region can be harvested by harvesting teams and mobile units, right? And this is quite important because this is the only faction that doesn't actually have to own the field where a spice field is to be able to harvest on it. You just need to have discovered it, and there is actually a development that allows you to discover all spice fields, which we'll have a look at shortly. So this can be really, really powerful, and you can actually get a lot of spice with Fremen quite easily. And also, there is one of the operators that you can have assigned that even makes it easier to harvest by making your harvesting teams stealth, which we'll look at that shortly too. Can form alliances with sieges outside of territory, so that's quite useful as well, because some of the factions are kind of shackled to having to own those or be next door to a siege to be able to be friendly with it, whereas with the Fremen you can do it with them anywhere. And a big part of the strategy with the Fremen is using the sieges to your advantage. If you don't, then you are missing out on a lot of benefits should you not want to do that. Can use thumpers to perform worm riding. Now this is a really useful ability. What this does is that when you're in the sand, or your troops are in the sand, you can select for a worm to take you from one place to another. Now without upgrades, it hasn't got the biggest reach, and rocks and terrain that worms can't actually ride under will prevent you from getting from one place. So all depending on how the map is, thumpers can be really used to your advantage. Without upgrading within the siege, to be able to have more than 3 thumpers, which you get as standard, and to be able to regenerate them faster. And also you don't regenerate them until you get a 5 hegemony, then they can be a little bit limited in comparison to, say, some of the other factions that can set up airfields. However, the fact that you can kind of use them wherever you are on the go from one place to another that you choose, assuming that's in a path a worm can ride, is extremely powerful. And if you are going on the offensive, there are some specific upgrades within the military tree that can make it so that you do extra damage when you come out of a worm ride. So you want to go out of your way to use it when you want to go on the attack. We'll cover that later, so that's really, really good. So some of the bonuses then, so all factions have bonuses at 5k hegemony and 10k hegemony. Typically you'll just get this passively from expanding out on the map, as with the Fremen you do expand very, very quickly, typically with them, so you will get to these hegemony milestones really, really quickly within a game. So for 5k, surrounding a deep desert grants control over it. Now this can be really useful. There are some developments that are there for that. However, it's not always easy to get fully surrounded by a desert, so you do need to take into consideration who you're near and whether you think you can get around it in a quickly manner. If you can, then the benefits can be absolutely incredible, but you do need to look at the villages that are surrounding that desert to see whether you are going to benefit from those. So you do need to keep an eye on that to see whether the investment or the time and effort you'll go to trying to surround the desert is actually worth it in the long run. And as I said earlier, thumpers are generated passively and attract larger sandworms that can travel further. So this is good. So at 5k hegemony, yes, they get further. I think there is an upgrade in the development tree that does expand that even more. It's either in the development tree or it's within one of the siege upgrades, and that's probably one of the things that's actually not included in this cheat sheet. So that is something that I may review if people are interested in it. Obviously, this stuff that I can get really easily in the game, the siege network stuff, is a little bit more niche, and maybe we'll do like a separate video on sieges if you guys want it. So just leave a comment below. So at 10k hegemony then, grants knowledge of enemy alliances with sieges. So essentially this allows you to know whether your enemy is using that siege to ally with them, and they could be potentially getting some bonuses too. And allied sieges have a settlement capable of hosting a specialized industry. So yeah, that's something that we're not going to cover off in this cheat sheet here, but we can do a separate video on the sieges. As I say, I may just deep dive into that anyway, because I think some of the unique powers that you can get from them are quite useful. So probably one for a separate video if I'm honest, because although typically you would go for sieges every single game, there probably is an argument that you may not do it every game, or you may not be interested in the industry specializations, because they do cost quite a bit and they are an investment. Alright, so that is the overall Fremen, their faction bonuses, their hegemony milestone bonuses. Let's move over now to the operators that you can have with those. So let's start off with Mother Romello, which is considered a hard operator. So allows the construction of the Shai Hulud temple in a village, and harvesting teams gain stealth and can receive one more crew. So why do I think this is probably considered hard? Just because you need to give some thought to the Shai Hulud temple. From my knowledge, that does cost quite a little bit, and it can give you a lot of good bonuses, but you do need to place it in a position that is surrounded by other. So typically, let's say for example, you've got like 5 or 6 different territories or zones or tiles, and then in the middle of that you've got one that kind of connects or touches all of them. Then the Shai Hulud temple can be really beneficial there. So you don't just want to place it willy-nilly on the edge or when it's only connected to one. You really want to go out of your way to make sure that the Shai Hulud temple is giving you the maximum benefit that it can possibly provide in the game that you're currently in. So that is why I think that would probably be considered hard, otherwise you wouldn't be getting any benefit from it. The next one is the Sand Killers, or Ofame, I think, probably butchered that. So this gives military units 10% speed, and military units gain Sand Killers when no allies are nearby. So 25% power and minus 25% damage received. Now, I don't find this very useful in the way that I play. I definitely think that if you wanted to be super aggressive early and you want your troops to go out and capture a lot of the debris that's on the different tiles, that extra speed is going to help you to get around. And also, if you do get attacked, then some of your troops may be a little bit more potent when they're on their own. But typically you won't, for example, that extra power and the damage received without any extra bonuses. So if you're just using vanilla troops, like say for example one troop won't be able to take out, potentially in most scenarios, a tile with 2 militia within inside the village. So it's not like you can just send one troop over to them. I've tried it. It's very inconsistent, and so I think that power just needs a little bit more of a buff. I don't think it's going to have a massive impact in the overall game, just because you don't typically fight zones or areas with just one troop. There isn't, unless you get like way later into the game, then maybe your Fedekins that you can get at 10k hegemony would be much more potent on their own. But at that stage, your enemy's probably going to have more troops to respond to one squad of Fennekin, so that bonus just isn't going to be there. So I think the reason why it's considered easy is because there's not really much thought that needs to go into it. You just need to be aware that your troops are more potent when they're on their own. But I do think that is quite a weak operator, and personally I don't use it. Chennai Keens, I don't know. Can use Insight Rebellion on Landsrad resolutions, causing rebellions in enemy villages if it passes. So this can be really good for teams that are trying to win the Landsrad, and if you do manage to, cause a rebellion then you can make somebody's life quite difficult, because once a rebellion kind of starts within a village, they need to go over, get rid of the militia that are causing the rebellion, so that they can then continue production or workings within that village space. So it can really help with kind of diversifying someone's troops and just causing a lot of disruption. If you can actually time this with when you're going to attack, that can actually be really, really useful. And then gain 1+ intel production per neutral neighboring region. So, you know, having that extra intel, especially, you know, if you go out of your way to get one tile that is surrounded by neutral regions and you're going for, say, an assassination, that extra intel will add up quite quickly, and that could be quite powerful. And then the last one then is Stilgar Ben Frawi. I don't know. Yeah, I told you I was going to butcher these names. Gain 1+ authority production per controlled region with Spice Field, and controlled regions with Spice Fields give -20% upkeep to neighbouring controlled regions and to themselves. So in my humble opinion, right, Stilgar and Mother Romello combined are absolutely S tier, top notch. I always pick these pretty much 9 times out of 10 in my matches, because you can get those neutral spice fields that we spoke about earlier from the faction bonuses. You're also getting an additional 1+ authority, which is huge, which allows you to take over more fields quicker, so more tiles and areas within the map. And then also that just additional regions with spice fields give a -20% upkeep to neighboring controlled regions and to themselves. It's just, again, another benefit that just can't go unnoticed. So, you know, you combine the synergy between your faction bonus, with Mother Romello also giving you an extra crew and making your harvester stealth, and then Stilgar obviously giving you that production as well. Just the synergy across those 3 is noticeable, and you will definitely notice your increase in just gathering spice and being able to hold fields way longer, way quicker, and in neutral zones, and be left pretty much to your own devices. So that is really, really good. One thing to note about the Fremen as well that isn't specifically called out in here is that you don't actually have to upgrade or research for wind traps. So most zones that you get at the start are usually got quite high wind numbers, and then what that does is you can put a wind trap on, you get really, really high water values at the very start of the game, which obviously allows your troops to just expand really, really far without having to come back for supplies. But it also does mean that those neutral spice fields that are really, really far away, you can send your harvesting teams over to those, and they will pick up that spice with no problem at all, and they will make it if you prioritize a wind trap farm on every single tile. So that is really, really, really powerful. So what I've done is I've split up the unique developments specifically for the Fremen into 4 columns, and what they literally go down into is, it starts off with the first column being the top left. So that's typically like your money, your spice, your production in Solari, which I'm referring to as money. And then you've got the bottom left, which is typically around agents and counterintelligence and trying to, potentially assassinate your enemies. So that's going to be bottom left. The third one is at the top right. So we've only got 2 there, which is for like militia, military development and boosting up your armies. And then you've got bottom right, which is all about research, authority around the map, defensive on your tiles and stuff like that. So we've just specifically outlined the ones that are unique to the Fremen, and we're going to go through those now. So let's start off with the very, very first one. So this is the Arrakis Secrets. So as I said earlier, there was a power that you could get which would reveal all spice fields, and this also unlocks spice silos, which is a village building. So this isn't unique to the Fremen, the actual spice silos bit, but the Al Gahib temple building and the spice fields is unique to the Fremen. And so what this does is the spice fields being revealed to you straight away means that you can just keep sending out your harvest teams. Like I said earlier, with that synergy of the war, go out to the neutral ones that you know aren't close to your enemies and start tapping some of that spice early. And the spice silos, obviously not really unique for the Fremen, but allows you to place a building that will increase your production on those spice fields. If you can get a zone that is connected to 2 spice fields and you put the silo on that zone, that's going to be like really maximum output and you know, value for the cost of a spice silo if you can pull that off. So that's really useful. The special siege upgrades that you can get, again, we're not going to go into like big detail on these. Again, this is probably worthy of another video, to be honest, because these are the upgrades that you get within your actual siege network at the start, so your kind of main base. And I think that probably does deserve its own video, so look out for that. I definitely will do that, because I do think talking about some of those upgrades is worth it. So for this specific Arrakis secrets, we're not going to go into detail of it, but we will get another video, and when I do produce that video, I'll link that to this one and vice versa for you to check it out in the future. Alright, the next one then is Freedom Fighters. So what this does, it gives you 0.5 Solari production per existing neutral or Fremen village, and 500 plus Solari when liberating a village, and unlocks the trade agreement treaty. So again, so much to talk about in this game. The agreements and stuff that you can do with ally players and the computer has probably got its own video, to be honest. The agreements you can do with computers will probably happen 9 times out of 10. They'll take the agreement from you. With players, it's a little bit more strategic, and don't be surprised if you run into an online game and people start declining these. There are some negatives as well as great benefits to trade agreements, and I do think that, you know, we probably do need to go into a little bit more detail around those. So again, look out for that video. But obviously with the Fremen, typically you do get a lot of authority that you can get really quickly with them, and you can just expand really quick with no penalty. And so that additional Solari production that you can get, along with, you know, the extra Solari, if you can get this one relatively quickly, you will get a huge boost in Solari at the start of the game. The next one is Sand Brothers then. So 1 plus Solari production per ally siege. So again, if you're specifically going for the sieges, which typically you are, you can get additional Solari for capturing those. 10% resource reduction in the region of an ally siege and its neighbors. So again, if you are looking out for that, then, you know, and you're paying attention to the sieges that you're capturing and the neighboring like tiles that you've got near that or on that can be quite useful too. And then this unlocks the bazaar building in the siege there. So again, I do think this is worth its own video. What I will say is that upgrade specifically for the bazaar is actually extremely good. So without going into too much detail, essentially when you upgrade, you have these tiles that you can select, which is like 1, 2 or 3. Sometimes you'll have a couple of 1s, couple of 2s, maybe 2 3s. And essentially what that does is when you build 3 of the same or 2 of the same of that type of upgrade, so whether it be blue, red or yellow, that can give you the bonus that is associated with that. With the bazaar specifically, you only need to build it once on a single tile within your siege upgrade, and what that does is it will give you the 1 times bonus for all 3 of the categories. So it's really powerful. Again, I do think it deserves its own video, and I will look to do that. But just know that that is an extremely powerful upgrade and a very big boost to your strength as the Fremen, should you want to go down that road. And then lastly, ceremonial caves produce -10 Solari. Plus 10 Solari, and they also produce 1 plus knowledge. So the ceremonial caves are typically what you put on the fields that have got the kind of fire symbol on it. And so what this does is that, you know, ceremonial caves can be quite expensive, so this additional buff can really make it useful. And I do think that you want to pay attention to this if you are surrounded by those fields where you can build those, because, you know, if you kind of target this with the additional knowledge, which allows you to upgrade things a lot quicker, this can actually be really powerful. So you only need to upgrade, you know, 3 to get to shared transcendence, which doesn't actually take that long. So, you know, you could kind of target this quite quickly and, you know, realize where you could put ceremonial caves. Now, they are quite expensive up front, so it's not really something you're going to pump out the door super early. but you will be getting freedom fighters before that, so that's the second one that we mentioned, and that's obviously going to give you a boost in money, which you're going to need to be able to get at. So that's kind of everything in the money tree. Let's move on to the second one then. So this is the, you know, sort of everything to do with your influence and kind of this route. And again, I think there is an argument to say that the Fremen are quite weak when it comes to the Landsrad and the influence, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it. So let's just talk about some of this now. So immediately gains 60 relation with all sieges and 100% agent recruitment speed. So getting the extra 60 initially on the sieges is great because you can get them to 100 really quick. So very, very beneficial. And also having 100% agent recruitment speed is going to be great because you could just get more agents on slots that are going to help you to be able to identify those sieges a bit quicker, especially if you go for like the Arrakis slot, for example. That's going to be quite handy. So not bad, nothing to sort of jump up in the air, but definitely does save you some time. I don't actually know what the time is on to get it to 60 once you start trading with a siege, so maybe something that I can look into if people are interested in it. Each allied siege grants plus 50 max influence and unlocks the political agreement treaty and unlocks the embassy building in the siege. So again, I think both those two upgrades that you get in there are worth their own video. And again, what I'll do is when I go over those specifically, I will call back to these developments so that it kind of all ties back together in their synergies. But I think specifically for this one, allied sieges granting a max 50 influence. So this can be really useful if you do decide to kind of shock your opponents and go down the Landsrad route. So if you don't know, typically every other faction will have a standard amount of votes that they get every single vote from Landsrad, but with the Fremen you don't actually have that. So you don't have any additional influence or votes that you can apply. You only have the ones that you have been able to gather for yourself. So to be able to increase your influence by plus 50, providing that you are going out of your way to create more influence with buildings and different tiles and stuff, you know, adding that extra plus 50 if you're allied with sieges can really be quite powerful. Once you obviously get industries with sieges and you start upgrading your main base specifically towards you know, being able to get the Landsrad, it can throw players off quite quickly if you start going for Landsrad, because it's not typically something you'd expect from the Fremen. And then the last one says each allied siege grants 5% chance to detect an enemy operation and allows one agent slot in counterintelligence. So this is really useful if you are being assassinated or there's an assassination attempt on you. And what this does is it means that now I'm not actually 100% sure if it's only in the region that the siege is or whether it's in neighboring regions or just in general. So I'm not actually too sure on that one specifically. But what it does mean is that sometimes you can just naturally see where, say, cells are being placed on your villages without actually having to do a cell search. So you'll see the little symbol which is telling you that there's a cell there, and I believe that it is related to this siege network buff, but it's just not very clear to me how that 5% is calculated and which tiles that it represents. I believe in my games where I had it, I think there were sieges touching or neighbouring my tiles at a minimum, so I just assumed that they had to be touching, but again, not really enough clarity on that one to know. Just know that it does potentially save you from having to have a cell that needs to be manually researched and then searched on a tile to then see whether there's cells on it. So can be really useful from what I believe if there's an assassination attempt on you. All right, next off then is the military. So this is the top right of your development tree, and there's only two, so might seem quite small, but I think when we read them you'll see that they're actually quite powerful. So ground units gain a 20% speed in neutral territory. Now this is really underrated at first glance, because what this actually allows you to do is it allows you to be super aggressive. Now, I naturally am a rusher in RTS games, always have been. Fremen, in my opinion, allow you to rush people incredibly quickly, and this extra 20% speed, do not let it go unnoticed, because with you combine that with being able to reach out really, really far within your exploration of the map, you being able to create a lot of water at the start, and then your units having an extra 20%, this is super powerful. So highly, highly, highly recommend this. The next one is Adai Al-Krab, or Al-Krab, whatever. This one ties in really unique with your specific worm riding. So worm riding is 100% faster, which, to be honest, not ridiculously slow, but this obviously is very, very good because it means you can traverse super quick, and if enemies aren't keeping an eye, you can literally be from one place to another really, really quickly. And then worm riding is only visible from close range, so if you're being fast wasn't, you know, super powerful, then they don't even see it unless you've worm rided really close to either a unit or one of their buildings. And then on exiting worm riding, units gain plus 50% power on their next attack. I cannot stress to you, when you have about 5, 6, 7 units and you worm ride them from one location to another, they will literally obliterate militia on a village tile. Or if you want to counter attack another like a squad that's, you know, in an area, and they come out and they do their first attack, I'm telling you, when you synergize that with lots of different upgrades that you can do for military, this is incredibly powerful. And you know, it might be, I think at the start, when you first start worm riding, it can seem that it takes forever to get the thumpers back. You will, if you do intend on doing military as your main way of winning, you absolutely need to at least ally with one siege so that you can get the thumper upgrade within the industry to allow you to have up to 5 thumpers, and also increase your generation of thumpers alongside the 5k hegemony requirement that gives you obviously increased generation of the thumpers. Otherwise, you will find yourself in a position where you're just not able to worm ride that often, and then this kind of becomes a little bit underwhelming. So do bear that in mind. There are synergies that will work together with this, but don't go underestimating that 50% power on your units on their first attack is weak, because trust me, it makes a big difference if you want to do a really quick hit and run. All right, so that's it for the military then. So bottom right then, so typically your defensive kind of what I kind of call just upgrades to your general buildings, and more around sort of like your authority and stuff like that. So Desert Wisdom, wind traps produce 0.1 knowledge per level of wind strength in the region. Unlocks the research agreement treaty, and unlocks the Mason Guild building in the siege. So when I said earlier that you want, when you're building wind traps, to get more water, the additional 0.1 knowledge actually can be quite useful. If you think about, typically you want to try and go for a zone that's minimum got 3 to 4, if you can 5, before you put a wind trap on it. If I'm going super aggressive, then I'll just put a wind trap on every single tile. I don't really care, unless it's less than 2, then I'll literally put one on every single one. Because remember, you get free water per wind, so that's, you know, can be really, really powerful. You combine that with this Desert Wisdom upgrade, and if you've got 2 lots of 5, that's an extra 1 knowledge. That might not seem like a lot, but trust me, it really does add up, and it allows you to upgrade your developments much, much quicker. So, you know, this can be something that you can go for quite early. And the one before it that isn't specific to the Fremen, which is local dialect studies, that allows you to gain more authority from the more places that you capture, and just more production, I believe. So, you know, you have to get that anyway to get Desert Wisdom. So these two just pair really, really well, because you can start off in this tree and then move over in some of the other trees, depending on obviously what your goals are within that game. So good upgrade, like it. Control deep deserts grant neighboring villages +2 of the villagers' traits, and also 20% militia power, and 20% authority production per controlled deep deserts. Now, when we were talking earlier, within the, I think it was the, no. So when we when we were talking about the 5k hegemony, which was surrounding a deep desert, grants control over it, this kind of, so that is just a passive anyway. This can go hand in hand with Heir of Arrakis. So controlled deep deserts obviously grant neighboring villagers +2 instances of village traits, and then 20% militia power and 20% authority production per controlled deep desert. So again, if you can take control of a deep desert, it's not really close to enemies, you don't think it's going to be contested much, you can get around it really quickly. This is huge, like, and I mean really big. You know, plus 20% on militia is huge, because we're going to talk about Desert Watchers that complements this so nicely as well. And then also the extra +2 of villager traits. So again, when I said earlier, just make sure that you're comfortable or you like the passives that kind of meet your goals for what you want to achieve on those villagers. When you add +2 to them, incredibly powerful. You absolutely need to make sure you're going out of your way to hit those passives on the tiles around the deep desert, because when you get +2 on them, it's just going to be huge. You're really going to notice the difference. So for example, if you're getting Solari production for each for say each military building you've got, and you've got a tile that's completely got all your military buildings on it, then you add +2 on it, you're just going to get so much Solari on that specific village alone, which is going to be huge. And if you do that across, typically you usually get about 5-6 zones that surround a desert. You know, if you go out of your way to do all of those, plus you add the militia in there, they're not going to be easy to take over, and it's going to be really powerful. So Heir of Arrakis is literally, I honestly think, if I'm going to be frank, I can see it being the difference between winning a game and losing a game. And what I mean by that is losing a game if you invested in it and didn't really use it very well, and winning the game because you've become so powerful if you utilize it to your strengths that there's not really too much the enemy can do at that point once you combine your units on it as well. So definitely something that you need to kind of think about within your strategy, but can be huge. +1 militia slot then on Desert Watchers, and then +50 militia health per neutral neighboring village, and also unlocks the investment office village building. This is huge. So you know, getting an extra militia slot's great, and then the extra health per neutral neighboring village is also great. So for example, typically if you cover a whole desert, you might have a set of tiles around that desert that are neutral, and so for every one of those that's touching one of your zones, that's giving you extra health. Now this does become a little bit diminished when the zone isn't neutral, so you're butting up against the actual enemy, but because you're getting the plus militia slot, plus you're getting the extra power from Heir of Arrakis, the upgrade before it, I do think that, you know, it's not a big deal, but it does kind of diminish Desert Watchers a little bit. I would have liked to have seen +50 health for neutral neighboring and maybe +25 for enemy zones. That would have been, I think, a good compromise there. And then obviously you've got the investment office, which I think, again, specific buildings probably do deserve their own video. So I hope this kind of helps. This cheat sheet, if you do want it, I'll put a link for it somewhere so that you can download it, or you can just take a screenshot of it on the video. It kind of helped for me, kind of seeing it all in one place, but I do appreciate there are lots of references and more synergies that this cheat sheet kind of refers to that are more specific to the actual game. So what I will commit to you is doing videos on those, and again, specific to the Fremen. The reason why I put this video together is because I know there is a lot to unpack within Dune Spice Wars. There's just so much to it that you just don't necessarily see when you first start playing, and it probably took me a good 30 hours to really start to understand the synergies across all of this and really start to work like with it, rather than kind of not so much against it, but just being unaware of it, how it all kind of falls together. So I hope you do enjoy this video. Obviously leave a like and subscribe if you did. If there's something that I didn't mention and that you want me to cover in a future video, let me know. If there's something that I quoted that was massively incorrect, then let me know. Obviously if I pronounce something wrong, which we already know that I have, call me out on that too. But I think this video has been long enough. It's a huge deep dive. I don't think there was any other way for me to not do it in such a long format. But what I will do is put timestamps below on the specifics and the areas and that I cover, just so that you can easily navigate to what you care about. That's it for me. Hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.